Facebook. Good to see you. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour. We're about to get started with our wonderful guest today, our talented guest. I'm going to let people into the Zoom as well. We've got a wonderful live studio audience, as I like to say. We'll admit everyone there. Justice, I'm going to make you co-host. You can let people in as necessary. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Zoom. Good to see you. Love to see the regulars and also some new faces. It's going to be a fun one. Turn the notification off for joining. Okay, wonderful. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour, and I'm about to introduce the program so we get the context, and then we'll start launching into our interview with today's fine guest. And I'll get started here. Let's do it. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians like today, makers of other instruments, of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our various crafts, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical and harmonious world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can and should also subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour at just $16 a month. You do get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as all the archival recordings of well over 200 episodes in our member area. You can join using the link bit.ly/join PTRH, bit.ly/join PTRH. Don't forget that we have a podcast, and you could find that at pianotechradio.com. And we just started pushing episodes back out again. You can listen to the audio-only versions. It's a great way to pass the time in the workshop, driving your car, doing dishes, however you like to listen to podcasts. We also have a Substack where we publish blog-style content. I also just published an article there recently about a new venture. You can keep up to date on what's going on and also get inside information that you can't really access as an industry professional anywhere else. Deep history, design, all sorts of wonderful things about concert work. This is what we focus on here at Piano Technicians Masterclass. A peek at it on the blog, and if you like what you see, you can subscribe to the masterclasses. And then finally, we have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, the socials, and get on our email list by going to pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. Just enter your name and email address. All right, now comes the fun part. Let's introduce our guest for today. She's recognized as one of the most exciting pianists in contemporary jazz and praised as the laureate of her generation. Lynne has performed on the world's great stages for over 30 years. She is a winner of the Great American Jazz Piano Competition, has toured with legends like Tommy Flanagan, Hank Jones, and Marian McPartland, and has released 17 critically acclaimed albums, many topping jazz charts worldwide. And additionally, her music is full of passion and faith and love and joy, which is some recent themes in her Being Human release. And additionally, let's give her a last name. I've only said Lynne so far. It's Lynne Arriale, right? I pronounced that correctly? Okay.
Perfect.
I confused myself with all the possible things that I tried. Welcome, Lynne Arriale, to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Thank you.
Good to
It's
have you here.
here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, absolutely. Um, I want to pick out just one really fun thing from that bio. I love that you got to spend some time with the great Marian McPartland. That is wonderful. As somebody who hosts a kind of piano themed audio program, I just have so much respect and nostalgia for everything she put together. Like I remember when I found, and this was before you could you could easily access audio archives of things. This was a little bit before the internet really took a surge. And I think I found a CD of or something, her episode with Bill Evans. And I just treasured that. I loved hearing him talk. And I was like, oh, that's what Bill Evans sounds like. He's kind of got like a nasal, nerdy voice. That's cool. And just like listen to them jam and stuff. So yeah, tell us about it. Just let's start there just for fun. What was your experience with Marian McPartland?
I think I first met her when I substituted for her on a tour to Japan with Tommy Flanagan, Hank Jones, Cedar Walton, Monty Alexander, Ray Bryant. It was
Wow.
10 pianists, and the tour was called 100 Golden Fingers. And it's possible I might have met her before that, but we were in touch a little bit more when this happened. And she was unable to make the tour. And Jamil Nasser, who was a bassist in New York that I had played with, recommended me to substitute for her. And I got a call about a week before the tour. And of course, I went into shock immediately, to be touring with these legendary pianists
Amazing.
and to get ready to go to Japan. I think that was the first tour I went on when I moved to New York. So that's quite a way to start. In fact, the pianists on the tour were joking. They said, "Don't get used to this, because most tours are not like this." It was first rate all the way, and we just put our suitcases outside of our doors, and they would be picked up, and lavish dinners every night, and beautiful, beautiful concert halls. And it was really an incredible learning experience for me to play duo with Kenny Barron, or trio with um, Harold Mayburn and Roger Kellaway. I can't remember the configuration, but
Hmm.
there's so many different styles. And I found it fascinating to hear different pianists play on the same piano, because you think a piano sounds like a piano, but when
Hmm.
Tommy Flanagan, followed by Hank Jones, followed by Monty Alexander on that instrument, and you really can really hear not only the content of what they're playing, which in jazz helps define their sound, but their touch, the
Hmm.
level of intensity of their touch, how much pedal they're using. I mean, all these nuances that help to create a sound. So it was really a transformative experience for me, and they couldn't have been nicer and more kind and supportive. I continued to be in shock for several during the and after the tour. It was a lot. It was a lot to take in. But I came home, and then I got a call to be on Piano Jazz with Marian McPartland. And we played duo and chatted, and she was really a remarkable person and musician, very inspiring.
Cool. And so, okay, so let's just go back to this because this is the fact we're gonna have a lot of fun things to talk about. So 10 pianists, and was it like how you were all going to all the same places? How long were the concerts? Like, was it hours? Were you each playing for like 15 minutes? Did you do a different thing every night? I mean,
Yeah,
I want to hear more about how you bring all those people on tour and what it looks like logistically and, you know, yeah,
sure.
logistically how it happened. Yeah.
Sure. Well, we had three piano trios. That was the largest configuration. And the pianos were lined up, two were together, and then one is on the other side. And three pianos is a lot, because if we can't have our left hands in the same place, or we have to just lay out, because otherwise one pianist could be playing a particular voicing, and the other pianist could have another alteration, and they'd be clashing, to say nothing of what might happen rhythmically between them. Um, and so it's really quite a challenge. And then there were also two piano configurations, which changed every night. And then there was a section where we all played a solo piece. And then we also played trio, piano, bass, and drums with Bob Cranshaw and Alan Dawson. So it was
Wow.
really a potpourri of different textures, and it was so much fun.
And who initiated this? Was there a mind behind this?
Yes, there was. There's Takao Ishizuka. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He was a concert promoter in Japan, and he did many of those tours, maybe 10 over the years. And it's
Oh,
quite an expense to bring over 10 pianists and to arrange all the concert halls. I believe some of the times the pianos followed us, and maybe not always, but these were gorgeous instruments and they were really beautiful to play.
Oh, what I like about that is I like that somebody had an ambitious vision and they made it happen. It's kind of one of those things where I forget. I don't really play fantasy football, but I think this is kind of how fantasy football works. You just like pick your players and put them all on the team, but that's never going to happen. So I
It's
like that it
definitely,
happens in real life.
yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for launching there. I do often in the beginning do this, so I'm going to go back to my foundations and just hear a little bit of the story of you encountering music as a young person, or whenever it was that you got deep into it, and how that evolved and how you really came to this moment where you're like, hey, this is my life now. This is what I'm going to do.
When I was very young, and I think this was before morning kindergarten, so that's like 3 or 4, we had a toy piano about this big in our house, and I started playing it. And I would hear songs on the radio or recordings and a little phonograph that my mother had. And I remember refusing to take a nap unless there was music playing, and she would play the soundtracks to My Fair Lady and Camelot and The Sound of Music. So that was kind of in my consciousness. And at a certain point, I made the connection between what I heard and this world. And so I started playing by ear first. And that was my natural instinct. And I later found out that I had perfect pitch, which certainly helps. But I remember falling asleep at night as a little girl and kind of, thinking like, you know, playing the piano as I was falling asleep. And so I kept playing that toy piano, and then eventually my parents got me an old upright, and I started playing that. And I begged them to let me study piano, but I was really young, and I think they contacted the local piano teacher, and she said, "Oh, she's way too young," which now, of course, 3 or 4 would probably be considered old because there's so many prodigies. But and eventually she relented and let me study with her. And every week she would play the next piece for me. And I would come back the next week and play a rough approximation of that piece. But I really wasn't learning how to read music. And then she figured it out. That's what I was doing, that I was playing by ear. And she said, I'm not going to play this for you anymore. You need to learn how to read and so forth. And so I studied classical when I was growing up. I never heard jazz until I was in my 20s. But I always played by ear. And I had the great fortune to study with one of the world's most magnificent concert pianists, Rebecca Pennies. And I was lucky to have met her when she was in Milwaukee for a few years at the Wisconsin Conservatory of Music, before she eventually went on to the Eastman School of Music and was there for at least 40 years. Um, and so I came in and she said, we have to start over. Your technique is, not acceptable. And I was really tense. I had pain in my arms and so forth. And we started over. And she really emphasized singing a line in order to create the most human shape of the line that we're playing. Um, and before that, I had teachers who would say, well, when you get to this point in the piece, do this, which never really made sense to me because that means that every time you get to that point in the piece, you do that, whatever it is. But that isn't a natural, way to approach things. So the singing really became an important thing, and I've used that for years in playing as a jazz pianist as well, because I think that singing internally helps us to connect with our best mind or our best spirit. Um, Students often say to me that what they hear in their minds is so much better than what comes out at the piano. And I always think, now, why is that? And how do we work with that? If it's there and you hear it, it's not that it's not there, it is there. And we just have to work at making that connection through the hand.
Mm. Yeah, we recently had a expert in the neuroscience of practicing on Molly Gebber, and she wrote a book on it. Um, and I'm all into neuroscience, so that was also my jam. And she talked about how when you learn a piece, there's multiple levels. And one of them is that level on which, whether it's that you're singing it per se or just that you can sing it, right? That you have a learning of the melody in and of itself without the mechanical practice of it, right? Or, the notes on the page. And that's a different type of learning than your fingers can do it, right? And that to really get something practiced, you need to have both of those, right? And so it's great that you're sort of doing this naturally. By singing it, you get a chance to access the piece on that level. It makes it a stronger memory, right?
Definitely, definitely.
Um, so you're located in New York right now still?
No, I live in
No.
Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh,
I've been
Jacksonville, Florida. Okay, that's right, right.
years. I lived in New York for 14 and
Uh-huh.
moved in around 2000.
Okay. I lived in New York as well, from around 2009 to 2016. And I love doing this too, as we've done this with other guests who've lived there. Tell us about being in New York. I mean, come on, like as somebody who's a jazz aficionado, what a playground. You've got the Blue Note or, at various clubs open and close at various times, right? Like Smalls is open now. I think it was closed for a while. Um, and it's also kind of inspirational. Like there's artists that have moved to New York, that their name, but that was like where they got their signature sound, right? Or they had some transition in their career. So tell us about your experience in New York.
Well, being in New York is a transformative experience to be able to hear world-class artists any night of the week and to play with world-class artists. I think it elevates people. It helps bring people up to a higher level just by playing with such remarkable players. When I moved to New York, I knew that I had to start, finding work, and I went club to club with my little cassette recording that I had made when I was in Milwaukee, and that they had a lot of other cassette recordings, like hundreds, at these clubs. And I thought, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get work? And I realized that the phone wasn't the way to do it because they would either not answer or say, I'll call you back and never call back. So I had to keep going and popping in and saying, have you had a chance to listen? And I was fortunate to be able to start working with really amazing musicians such as Jamil Nasser, as I mentioned before, Frank Gant, both who had been with the Ahmad Jamal Trio, Rufus Reed, Harvey S., Elliot Zygmunt, Leroy Williams, a great drummer with Barry Harris, who was with Barry Harris for many years, Lyle Atkinson, and they mentored me, and they really taught me so much. And I was really being a sideman most of the time and going to jam sessions. But at a certain point, I realized that um, I could wait for the phone to ring and hope to get called, or I could do something and take my own initiative to create work for myself. I met someone when I moved to New York who was a really well-known pianist in the industry. He had recorded probably over 500 albums. He had been a sideman and worked with some of the really greatest artists of our time. And he told me that he was having trouble getting a gig as a leader. And that made a real impression on me. Of course, that was crazy that a club owner saying, gee, I don't know if he could be a leader. He's only been a sideman. Like, of course he can be a leader, but he was having trouble. And I made a mental note that it wasn't enough to hope that the phone would ring and to network, because that can go south, and I hope it doesn't for people, but players can come in and out of favor and so forth. And so I decided that I would spend most of my time trying to get a group out there. And I thought, gee, there are probably enough places in the US to keep a group working. And I would spend 8 or more hours on the phone every day. This is before computers. It's hard to imagine that that time existed. And I would cold call clubs throughout the country, and I had to somehow give them the elevator speech in like a minute to engage them and to at least get the door open so that they might listen to what I was going to send them. And that's how I got started. And eventually we started getting work and figuring out all the logistics of tour planning, and then went to Europe for the first time. And that was really an experience. and came back. I've been back many times since. I remember one of the members of my trio at that time, I formed a group that I wanted to try to work with all the time. He said, gee, it's not very much money. This is, maybe we should just wait. And I said, for what? I mean, what do you think? You think our price is going to get better 2 years later by not going to Europe and not introducing our music to them, to the people? And there's such an amazing jazz community in Europe. So we went, and it wasn't perfect. There were all kinds of challenges. And I remember saying to the guys, you guys, let's assume things are going to go wrong. If that happens and they don't, we'll be thrilled. And if they do, we won't have anybody, being upset.
Mm.
Uh, so that's kind of how I got started.
Yeah. I love all this. I'm I'm mentioning it here and there as part of this program. It's a slightly different venture, but or yeah, but it is connected. So I've started a new venture called University of the Universe. It's a very ambitious project to train people for the next millennium. Big deal. And there's another podcast that I started called the Future Education Podcast. One of the first pre-launch episodes. We're officially launching that podcast in March. One of the first pre-launch episodes is just a trombone player that I ran into um, while in Los Angeles. He was practicing on the roof of a what do you call it, parking garage for and I was just ran into him and said, I'm going to interview this guy on education, where it's at. And it was interesting to kind of hear him talk about, he's doing a master's degree. He did his undergrad. He played a little bit. Great player. But we did talk about how he's not really prepared for like the career part of it, right? He's prepared to play pretty well. But like what you described is interesting, right? For a lot of musicians and even for a lot of other professions these days, you kind of go through this educational process, but you really have to take things into your own hands, right? If you want to be successful career-wise and make it a living. And what you need to do changes with the every couple of years, to be honest, right? Like you said, there was a time where you had to call people, you had to send tapes, and I'm also remembering I'm not trying to get gigs playing now, but I remember a sort of analogous time. Send a CD or go in the yellow pages, make calls. And also, you didn't mention this, but you've probably run into this quite a bit, especially in New York. They don't necessarily care how the music sounds at all. And I think maybe this has even evolved more and more. Um, they really just want to know, how many people are you going to get in my club? Which is fascinating, right? Because you could see people with music that you think is terrible getting the gigs that you wish you had, but for some reason they've got some way to pull people into it. But anyways, this changes, right? And as a musician, it behooves a person to figure this out, whatever the equation of the day is, whether it's YouTube following, whatever. Um, so I really appreciate not only that you shared about that, but that you took that on, right? Because that's something that not everybody, maybe they don't become aware of it or they're not bold enough. So that's wonderful. I wanted to segue here into the whole education process, right? So you're teaching there in Florida, and I'm sure you've mentored various musicians over the years. Um, how do you see the context? How do you see, as somebody on the ground, how do you see the context has changed for you? Now you've kind of built a career. I'm sure it's a little bit different, right? What you do now, and also like how you see the students that you're working with approaching this. Not to say you have all the answers, but I just come curious, like state of affairs. What do you got?
Well, I've been so lucky to teach amazingly talented students who are so eager to learn, and they're like sponges. They just, uh, at every lesson I teach, the students seem to, if I play a voicing, there's a piano next to, two pianos adjacent, and they'll do that. So they're constantly trading theirs. I didn't tell them to do that, but I know they're inputting it and inputting it, sorry. I've been at the University of North Florida 17 or 18 years. And when I first heard about the job, I was living in Tampa for a while. And I initially thought, gee, I don't know if I want to be in academia. It feels kind of stuffy. and I decided to take the visiting professor position for a year. And the university and the administration wants us to be touring. I mean, not more than maybe 2 weeks a semester, but to go out and do concerts and be in the public. And I was really very happy to know about that. That's part of the work we do, of our scholarly activity, comparable to a philosophy professor writing a book.
Yes.
It's creating an album, or for any musician recording an album, or excuse me, or having music published and writing compositions or arrangements and so forth. But it's really been such a learning experience. I really glean so much from my students by watching how they learn, and their ideas as well about how they are learning and what is working. I always try to bring whatever the thing is that I'm working on, the principle that I think is really very helpful. I always have them try it to see if it works for them. I don't assume it will, but often it does, and it can be very helpful. And so I'm constantly working and trying to evolve as a player, and I want to always bring that to my students, as well as impart information from my experiences booking gigs and being on the road and producing albums and promoting albums, all of that. Artists today have to kind of do it all. It's really quite an endeavor to be an artist nowadays.
Yeah, it's like cross-disciplinary, right? Um, and there's also the path, which I think is totally fine as long as people figure out that that's how they want to execute it. It's just, play your music, have your job. They could be totally different things, you know. Um, Rick Rubin, are you familiar with Rick Rubin that
Yes,
much?
we've been practicing. It,
He's a record producer, and he has produced for, like, I'm trying to the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He's produced for Jay-Z, but also like the Beastie Boys. He's just like he's someone to check out. He has his own podcast, but he wrote this book on creativity recently. And you would think that a guy that has produced all these, like, ho volume selling records would be focused on how do you make a volume selling record, right? And his whole philosophy is, I don't care about that, right? I'm just focused on the artist. What do they have to say that's unique? Pulling it out of them so they're not thinking about how is this going to please people and whatever, but just being authentic.
Mhm.
And in his work, he often is kind of saying, you know, thinking about if it's gonna work or not is financially is not how creativity works. So if you gotta have a day job and you do that, but and you make your music, whatever facilitates the life that you want. Um,
That's a great book, by the way. I have it, and I think I've read it. I know I've read it. Uh,
yeah.
there's so many helpful things in it, and he has a wonderful perspective about opening up the energy to be creative, what to do if you get stuck, if
Mhm.
you know you're in a rut, how to kind of blow open any box that you might be in. So there's really a lot in the book.
Yeah, I mentioned this a few times on the podcast. The first thing I listened to is the Broken Record podcast, which he co-hosts with Malcolm Gladwell and Bruce Headlam. But then he has his own podcast, Tetragrammaton, both highly recommended. Um, and I was surprised. So we tune piano, have a piano tuning company in New York City, and Bruce Headlam's on our roster. I was like, oh, this is so cool. We tune his piano. Um, so I would love to hear a little bit more about, your album and, the music that's coming out. So tell us about the thoughts behind that. I love the kind of themes that you're addressing and how you approach it.
Thank you. My latest release is called Being Human. And this album was conceived kind of as a response to the division that we have in our country and in the world. And
There's a division? Wait, what are you talking about?
and it's pretty overwhelming for many of us. And I wanted to reach across the aisle and also kind of look at what it is about, what characteristics we share as human beings that define our humanity. And I wrote kind of tone poems for different qualities such as passion, love, perseverance, curiosity, joy, and several others that I hope reflect those sentiments. And some of these selections were dedicated to individuals. Passion is dedicated to Greta Thunberg, and Courage was dedicated to the people of Ukraine, and so forth. And I wanted to send, in whatever small way that I could, a message of healing and unity, even during these unbelievably challenging times.
Yeah. You're taking me to this place that I will say I haven't been like I said, a performing musician for a while, or really had a lot of time to just sit at the piano and compose like I have in the past. And you're reminding me that there's a mindset that I think a lot of musicians share specifically, and performers, creative people, maybe they're an actor or a dancer or something, where they just kind of look at the world and the conflict that people get into and they just go, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about being accessing that creative spirit that kind of makes all of that other stuff look kind of ridiculous. Where I think there's other domains where people can that their day to day is not involving creativity, or I don't know what it is, where that all just makes more sense. Yeah, we gotta be divisive. We gotta fight them. We gotta find out what's wrong with them, and create some sort of a binary conflict or something. Sounds like you sort of connect with that idea as well, right?
Yes. Well, I've I know what it feels like to not turn on the news, and I feel that that's not the answer for me either. But I also know the fatigue that I feel, that every day it seems like things are more challenging. And we can really take it to heart and feel awful all the time, but that's not a good choice either, obviously. So I don't want to be oblivious to what's going on, and I feel that uh, it's important for me, and I'm not speaking for anyone else, of course, to know what's going on, to be aware. There is a feeling of helplessness often because I don't know how things can change, and where we're headed. But I think I want to know what's going on. But by the same token, that doesn't help me create. And if I'm trying to put a positive message out, I don't want just a reactive message to what's going on in the world. That who
Hmm.
would want to listen to that? I want to bring something where there's a spirit of warmth and passion and hopefully peace and connection, because at the end of the day, that is what defines us. If we see someone in trouble, we don't ask what their political affiliation is. But these are still really important issues that are going to change our world. So, but still, we're human beings.
I'm curious, if anywhere, right, where you go to find this inspiration. Some people have a religious affiliation or like a spiritual they practice or something, or maybe just some other music that they um access. So, I mean, something musical that comes to mind is like, John Coltrane, right? It was fascinating to hear him talk about all these themes towards the end of his life, um, just how passionate he was, right? And how much on a mission he felt he was with the creation of his music around these concepts, right? So, well, yeah, what is there anything specifically that inspires you in terms of uh bring you get because you're giving this, but where do you get it? Yeah.
I I I start listening to other people's music, and it almost doesn't matter. I can just flip around, and by focusing outward, outside of myself, that can often stimulate ideas, because otherwise I'm stuck in my own bubble. And I might come up with something that I like, but I like to just kind of loosen that up in whatever way I can. And I sit at the piano and I might listen to something and I might sing something or I might play something. And the minute I hear what I think might be an engaging opening phrase for a composition, I write it down. And my manuscript paper has 4 lines for each measure so that I could start bar one of a composition and write one option, but right beneath that, I could have a different bar too. And I have arrows all over the place because this is a process. It's a rare occurrence for me to sit down and write something fully formed, but you have to get something out. And I remember seeing a movie years ago. I think it was with Diane Lane, Beyond the Tuscan Sun, or something like that. And she was a professor of composition, of writing. And a student came to her and said, "My first novel it's really terrible, and everything I write is terrible. I can't get past square one. I don't like anything I'm doing." And they were trying to write a novel. And she said, "Write something really bad." Because, and that makes perfect sense. The minute you say that to yourself or to someone else, you write something and you say, "So what if it's bad?" So maybe you'll have to write 100 first ideas. But if you don't do anything, there's nothing to work with. And I've in the small ensembles that I coach at the University of North Florida, sometimes I've had students write compositions, and there'll be a few students that say, "This is awful. This is terrible." And of course, I don't agree with them. I say it's highly unlikely that 100% of this composition is awful. I don't see that that's possible. And let's go measure by measure. Are you okay with this measure? Yeah, I'm okay with that. What about the second one? Yeah, I guess I'm okay with that. And so let's find the areas that maybe need some work, but you have 60% that you think, that it's okay. And so part of it is just getting the juices flowing in a way. When I write and I'm getting ready for an album and I have a deadline, I I know that the first 20 compositions could be just really mediocre, and I kind of laugh about it. Like, these are just consistently mediocre. And they get filed because maybe there's a phrase in bar 15 that I could use for something else. I kind of like that. And I can bring it back. And then at a certain point, something starts to click in. I can't even say that I'm in the flow because that assumes that I'm in this unbroken creative state, which rarely happens. But that's kind of how I work with the process. And
Mm.
if I get stuck, I turn on other people's music, and maybe I'll hear just an interval or something that is compelling, and I might do something like that. And in jazz, we borrow all the time. We borrow from each other, but we make it our own. So
Yeah, yeah, sometimes I feel like if you don't borrow enough as a jazz musician, you're going down the wrong path, right? And I've also often been fascinated as I research um, great musicians that I admire, and they talk about who their major influence. Take John Coltrane again, and I remember hearing that John Coltrane really was influenced by Sidney Bechet, and I remember then going and listening to Sidney Bechet. I mean, like, this doesn't sound anything like John Coltrane. And so I don't know. It's kind of fascinating how, and I feel like I have yet to even dive deep enough in my own life and career on this, but that you can study another person, or even like Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie, you hear a little bit of that really specific kind of sound at the beginning of his career, but by the end of it, um, but to study another person so deeply that they make you into something else that's like totally different. I love that.
that's fascinating.
Um,
Well, it's all
yeah.
our filter. I remember studying with a teacher years ago who said something to me. He said that he could imitate 5 different great jazz pianists, and now he had to find out who he was. And I found that a very confusing statement because that's, to me, and I appreciated everything I learned from him, but that to me is like saying, well, I'm 21 now. I can be my mother. I can be my father. I could be my brother. I can imitate them perfectly. Now I wonder who I am. You already have a personality forming at a very, very young age, and everything you do, the people that you surround yourself with, the books you read, the music you listen to, the food you eat, everything helps to create a personality. So when we hear that someone influenced someone else, sometimes we can hear it, but sometimes it went through many different filters and transformation. Um, I remember hearing Keith Jarrett say that he didn't really imitate anyone, but he was influenced by the spirit of certain players.
Mm,
And whatever, I don't know what that meant to him exactly. The energy of their playing, the flow of their lines, I have no idea, but I found that very interesting.
mm. Gosh, there's so much that we could talk about. I want to listen to some of your music. I'm going to make one more comment on that, which I've also found interesting. But we're going to get to some of your music so we hear it before we go. Um, I loved visiting New Orleans because you have the players playing the old style music on the streets, busking. And when you said the spirit, it made me think of how they also will dress oftentimes in an older type of style. So like when you see them playing the trumpet or the trombone on the street, and it sounds like Louis Armstrong, it almost looks like it's some sort of weird time machine too, because they got the dress of that era on. And I feel like that's part of that idea of the spirit. And I've heard that in more than in the US, and in some Asian countries, I want to say like Japan, they'll also do this kind of like they learn the music, but they also like are the person, they dress like them or walk like them, talk like them, that kind of a thing.
Fascinating.
Um, let's listen. So, what's your choice? We mainly have space for one or two. What's your best option among what you shared?
Passion?
Passion? Okay, let me see here. Okay, great. And this is dedicated to Greta Thunberg. So we'll just do audio only on this one. So I'll share my audio. Let's see here. Share. And advanced computer audio. And then we'll do a test. Make sure it's working. Do you hear it? I'm gonna fade it so we can hear something else. Wonderful. Who's a bass player?
As Alan Near,
Hmm,
the drummer is Lucas Żyta. Lucas is from Warsaw and Alan is from Tel Aviv. And he lived in New York for many years. He recently moved back to Tel Aviv.
great. I love how the bass is just kind of like dancing, It's very cool.
He's very lyrical.
Um, I want to hear more. So, and then we'll chat more too. Maybe we'll go like 5 minutes over. What would be a good second option?
If you have time for just a little bit of love and a little bit of joy, that would be great. That
Okay.
contrast.
So it's some time for love and joy. Does it make sense to start at the
Uh,
beginning?
yeah, yes, love, yes, at the beginning for both of them. Yes.
No time for love. Here we go. This is love. All right, just so we have time for more. I got the video in there. I forgot we had a video for that one.
It's okay.
I want to make a comment and then I do want to hear the gotta have a little time for joy. Um, I I've had this thing that I wrote, sort of wrote or composed many years ago, and I love what I love about your project is reminding me of it. Um, it's all free improv, but there's four parts. They're each about the same length. You can compress it or expand it. But they were usually about like 10 minutes a piece or something, 10, 15. And I went from violence to fear to hope to peace. And the idea was to meditate. I would meditate as I played on whatever that thing was, whatever came out, And the concept was, not to meditate on violence as, as you're doing with these positive things, but to, consider that I thought of it as like an evolution for people, right? When we're coming from this place of violence is when we're, and interestingly, my concept was the least creative. It's the least creative place you can be. And you move to fear because that's kind of where it comes from. But at least if you're in the fear, at least you're not being violent. You're like kind of sitting in where the violence comes from. And then if you can move to a higher level, you get into hope. And if you can get into hope, you can get into peace. And I always felt like there was a spectrum of creativity along the whole thing. You're all low on the creative end. That's when you're getting into, you're frustrated. You're not thinking of alternatives. You're limited. You're in this violent, fearful space. If you can get into creative domains, you can go to
That's
the others.
wonderful. What a great concept. I
And
like
what I love about this too is I would encourage the audience to meditate on that concept as I played. And this is what I'm loving doing as I listen to this. And I'm hoping, guessing this is part of your intention, is not just to listen to music, but to think about what the piece is about and give yourself a chance to open your heart to it. I think it's very special.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you for saying that.
Okay, Joy, or did you want to say anything else before Joy? Now,
Joy.
what I'm doing here is I'm starting at the beginnings and then I'm fading out to for time purposes. Should I begin at the beginning of Joy as well, or
At the beginning. Yeah.
at the beginning? Okay. All right, let's see here. Here's Joy, and we'll do the video from the beginning this time.
I don't think there's a video of Joy. I think it's
Oh,
audio.
that one is audio only. Okay,
Yes.
that's
Okay.
let's do audio only for that one. All right, share computer audio. And here we go. Okay, in the interest of time. Um, I'm that makes me think of, do you know what piece that makes me think of?
No.
No? Oh, St. Thomas.
Oh, that did pop in my head.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Calypso.
it.
It's a calypso, and so it has that groove. Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, it's a unique piece, but it's got that energy. I was like, oh, okay, that's a nice place to go for the joy. Um, well, wonderful. I'm glad we got a chance to listen to some of the music. I did have all sorts of domains, that I would love to explore with you in conversation as well. You're wonderful, thoughtful conversationalist as well as great musician. So appreciate you showing up that way. Um, we do kind of have to roll out as we typically do after about an hour. Um, Anything you want to make sure that we share that you didn't share or that you feel is especially important? I always say words of wisdom, an album coming out, a website, a social media, it's your time to make sure you get something to the audience.
Sure. I'd love it if people would reach out and say hi. My website is lynneariale.com. It's LYNNEARRIALE.com. And I'm on social media. And I'll be touring in Europe in November. And I've got a few dates in the spring in Seattle and San Francisco. And my goal is to just share music and share positive energy with people and reach them, their hearts, hopefully. And I'm always grateful to have listeners. And I just want to thank everybody who attended for being here, and especially to you, Ethan, for being such a great interviewer. And it's really interesting to hear your perspective on things. And thank you for doing this wonderful show.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely take some time. I'm gonna listen to the whole thing. I'm gonna close my eyes and I'll check the themes. I think it'll be a wonderful exercise. And I feel like I would encourage other people to do so as well. Hopefully, I don't know if you approve, but I feel like just listening to music with that has an intention to it, holding that intention, opening yourself up a little bit to what's coming through. Because we have words, and words can be great, but they can be a problem. And music communicates on a different level.
Yes, it does.
So I think that's a great exercise. If anybody wants to take me up on that and share your thoughts and experiences with both me and Lynn, I'd love to hear how that goes for you. All right. We should probably walk it out. As I said, we could probably talk all day. Wonderful opportunity to spend some time with Lynne Arriale. But I'll walk us out. This has been the end another musical journey at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Want to thank Lynn for joining us today. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. This is cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined us today, by signing up for this session individually, you could make your life more convenient. You should by subscribing to Piano Tech Radio Hour, just $16 a month. You get direct access to all of our recordings, as well as today's session in our member area, automatic registration for each week's new session. You can sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH, bit.ly/join PTRH. Remember the podcast, pianotechradio.com, the Substack blog. We also have LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and email list on the website. And if you get a chance, go check out the new pre-release program, Future Education Podcast. That can be found at uotu.xyz, University of the Universe. That's what that stands for, uotu.xyz. Okay. Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. We appreciate having you here. Goodbye.